Hello everyone, it's Paul with RGS Restorations, and what I'm going to go over today is I have a restoration, refinishing, more like a repair project laid out for us on a Sharps rifle, and it happens to be my own personal Sharps rifle. Now I have the barrels all off of them, as you can see here, but the quick backstory is this rifle came to me. It was chambered in 5090. Now, I don't mind the 50 calibers. I like them. My only issue is perhaps with the 5090 is it's a bit too long of a case for smokeless powder. And if you've been watching my videos on antique firearms, I do prefer smokeless rather than shooting black out of them. Yeah, black is fun once in a while, but I shoot quite a bit and it's just not something that I particularly enjoy cleaning black powder in both the firearm and the case. So I like smokeless, and when the cases are start to get a little bit too long, the efficiency of smokeless goes way down, and it's just it's not good. So the 5090, I really never shot it a whole lot. And then I came across a 4570 barrel, Sharps 4570 barrel, which is this barrel here. And I'm almost embarrassed to say this, but I had a heck of a time getting it to shoot. The best I could get out of it was 1.5 inches at 200 yards with a fairly hard bullet. And I was like, man, something's not right here. And I went through the effort of slugging the bore and making sure what the groove diameter was. I never checked the chamber length. It finally, after I was playing around with bullet seating depth, it's like something's not right here. I can't hang this bullet out far enough to engage the rifling. And that's when I noticed this chamber is 2.6 inches in length, which works out to a 45-100. And that is just that is way too long for smokeless. So with that in mind, I pulled that barrel off and I ordered another barrel. So what I have here is the barrel that I'm going to put on it. Now this is just a blank. It's a pretty heavy blank. This one measures out, there's just the tiniest bit of taper. What do we got here? Like 1.175 at the muzzle. And I think it's 1.310 at the tulip, and the flats at the breech are, like 1.2. So it's a pretty heavy barrel. And what I'm going to show with this is, I'm going to show how we get this ready. Well, basically where we start, we're going to turn it. I'm going to show threading it. We're going to thread it. We're going to, turn this section down here, thread it, fit it to the action, and then we're going to crown it. After that, we're going to blue it. And then, chambering will come after we're done with the machining. The last step will be chambering and cutting the extractor cut. So we're going to show all that. Then we're going to blue it, and then we're going to go back to the range and shoot it and see how we're going to get. Now, again, it is going to be 4570, which is going to give me, which I think works really well for smokeless and being accurate. Gives you all the case capacity you need for modern smokeless powders without having a whole lot of empty case in there. You get a better fill ratio, so you can get some good accuracy. Now, what I like about this barrel over the other ones is it is going to be a little bit longer. I should end up with either a 30 or a 32 barrel length on this one for a heavy barrel. Now, the original one in the 50, this thing is just kind of an oddball. This thing is 1.250, so it's 1.25 inches at the muzzle and the breech, and I think it's only like 26 inches in length. So when you have a big heavy barrel like that and it's kind of short, it loses all proportion and it just doesn't look right. And that barrel was always plenty accurate for like plinking stuff at 100 yards, but as soon as I tried to really get serious, by the time I'd get to 300 yards, my accuracy was just falling apart. And it just has to do with the case capacity. So 5070s or the 50 governments tend to be a little bit, a little bit more cooperative to getting a good smokeless charge in there. So anyway, that's pretty much it. We're going to reuse this original forend that came with the rifle, which is kind of pretty big, but I'll bed it to fit the new barrel. And yeah, we're just going to machine everything up and go at it. Now, This receiver is just, standard original sharps with a double set trigger, so it should shoot all good with a new barrel on it when we're all done. So kind of looking forward to getting that on there and getting out to the range. Now it is later fall in Wisconsin, so we'll still have plenty of range time left, but it's going to start getting cold soon. So with that being said, I am going to get at it. We have our new Sharps barrel in the lathe, all chucked up and ready to go. Now, when we get a new barrel in, they are going to be large in the shank that you thread. So those have to be turned down to a final diameter. And on the Sharps, that is 1.127 of an inch. Once we have that completed, we can move over to the threading. Now, Sharps are cut with square threads, and square threads aren't that great to cut. They're kind of a pain. They're fussy, and you gotta, I constantly am checking and testing and making the final adjustments. But anyway, the thread count on Sharps threads are 10 threads per inch, and like I said, those are square. And it's just a lot of going back very slowly, getting those threads to the final depth. And once we get our receiver threaded on and it threads up and all of that, we're going to worry about getting the back end of the very tail end of the chamber section cut to a rough dimension in length. And then we'll finish that off, taking much smaller cuts as we check it with the breech block and feeler gauges. But this is the process of just roughly getting that breech end section ready to go for the final finishing. And here we're just putting a few final passes on that breech section, getting it, to the final length. We use this a dial mic, which is a little bit of a crude method intentionally, just, for speed. It's plenty good enough to get us close. Like I said, put the lever in there, and I'll use the breech block and feeler gauges. And what I'm shooting for is having the receiver threaded onto the barrel about hand tight, with about 2/1000 play in a feeler gauge, with like the last flat coming up 10 degrees. And that pretty much sets us up perfect for having pretty much a zero head space or air gap between the breech face and the barrel. Once that's all done, we're going to start with our chambering process. And that is just a lot of lubricant going very slow. Now, I do kind of a firm believer in using charts on spindle speeds and all that for doing chambering. And I like to go slow. And obviously this footage is sped up a lot, but very slow, small amounts of cuts, cleaning the chips and the debris from your reamer constantly while, advancing an appropriate amount. And you'll know because you can kind of feel it, like the chips wants to get a little bit grabby and stuff like that. But anyway, yeah, we get that all ready. We get our case in there, and I'm using a straight edge in the case, and I want that case rim to just sit underneath the flush part of that barrel. And that will give us, and again, this is all just until we get the barrel like actually finally, torqued into spec and all that stuff. That just sets everything up. One of the last steps on a Sharps barrel is there's a slight radius from the threads, where the threads are cut back to the breech face. There's a slight round and radius there, and all Sharps have that, and that's kind of a nice little juncture that makes it look good, so you're not looking at abrupt, coarse, grisly kind of threads staring at you. Once everything is done on the breech end, we turn that around, and now we're going to cut the muzzle to its final length, taking that off of there with a parting tool, and then putting the final finish on the muzzle. And now for this particular rifle, I decided to go with just a standard recessed style target crown, and I just cut that back from the front And once I have the depth of that recessed cut in there, I will use our deburring tool and lapping compound, and I will lap that crown in on the muzzle, and that finishes us up for the barrel work. So we have all of our machine work done, threading, all of that. So now we're left with lathe marks and some minor dings from tooling and all that, and we need to polish all that out. So I'm going to do the bulk of that on the machine, and we're going to get mostly all of that out, and I'm going to show that. Now I'm not going to do a really super in-depth explanation on polishing. I did a whole bunch of polishing videos. You can always check those out, and if you want a lot of information, but this will give you an idea of just the steps that we got to go through to get this ready for the final bluing. So we're going to go through everything, make sure there's no more nicks from the chuck, the jaws clamping, and the machining of the barrel. And there were some transition steps in here from machining, which are all very minor, but they all have to come out to get the best of jobs. So we're going to go ahead and we are going to do that now. And I'm going to show you how I do it on the machine. I do the bulk of my polishing using a Bader grinder with a 12-inch wheel with a hard rubber face on it. And that particular unit uses 2 by 72-inch belts. But anyway, on this right here, the exact abrasive that I'm using, I think is a 3M Trizact. And I will go through all the different grits, probably starting from about 120 going up to about a 400. For rust bluing, I generally don't ever go any higher than that, as that is more than enough to do it. So you'll see that there's some longitudinal lines in there that will keep working out, and it's kind of showing how you can keep the edges very crisp and very sharp while still working on a big wheel. I do not hand polish all of that stuff out of there. There's just really no need for any of that. And we're just basically doing long up and down strokes against the surface of the wheel with the barrel. And we're setting the grain of that. From there, we move over to hand polishing. And like I was talking earlier, I did a whole video on this, but you can see that we're cross polishing starting at a more coarse grit, and then we're going to continue working through the finer grits all the way up again to about a 400. And what we're doing is just in that tulip section in the back where it's partly round, we're blending that in where the machine or the polishing wheel cannot get into that section. So we have to stop short, and that's what we're doing. We're just blending that section back in and then finishing all of that polishing by straightforward back and forth marks, and we just cross polish, make sure that there's no more coarse and any abrasion lines underneath it, and we just keep going through each and every flat, turning the barrel each time and moving on and doing the whole barrel in that method. And it's just a matter of using a lot of working up between each different grit, like 120, 240, 320, and then a 400. We'll flip the barrel at that point and we'll start working on the muzzle. And it's exactly the same thing where we do a little bit of cross polishing to check our progress and make sure that we don't have any more coarse grits underneath that. And then we finish off by going straight back and forth and blending that grain all in along the whole back and forth of the barrel. And once we have all that done on the breech and the muzzle section on the flats, then we'll turn over to the crown section. And there I usually, just because the lathe does such a good job of doing a finish, I usually only have to start with maybe a 320 or 400 to put the final polish on the crown of the muzzle, which we don't blue that, but it's going to tarnish with bluing, and then I'll just repolish that once again when we're done. At the very end, we're going to use a 3M Scotch-Brite belt on there, and that's going to be, like roughly
to about a 400 grit. And again, it's setting that grain on that barrel longitudinally, perfectly straight, all the way up and down each flat of that barrel and blending that all in. And once we do that for each one of the flats, that's it. We are done polishing and we can move on to the bluing operation. Okay, so I am going to apply a coat of acid, or another pass of acid, on our sharps barrels here. Now I have 2 passes on here now. They're pretty good and black already. I'm not going to go over a whole lot on how I blue. I'm working on a whole video on that, so I'm just going to kind of go over this really quick and just show you what I'm doing here. So I have our acid on a cotton ball that is squeezed out, and most of the acid has been squeezed out. I try to get as much back out of it as possible. There's just no need to have this thing sopping wet. Now, I had went and looked at a lot of other rust bluing videos on YouTube, and it was different. I will say my method is not anything like that. Most of what's on there, but I am working on a video. It's probably going to take a little while to get it all completed with what I have going on. So as you see me, it was real quick, and I go over this very lightly. I get it so it's wet. You don't stop in one spot. You don't rub on it. You get it wet in one pass and you're done. The trick is to actually try to put the least amount on as possible while still getting it wet. So I want it wet, but I want to put the least amount of acid on as possible. And that is really all it takes. Now this will go into our hot box, and a barrel this big, it's very important that you get the steel up to temperature. This barrel will get up to about 110 degrees in Fahrenheit before I put the steam on it. And that's because you don't want your dew. You have to watch out for your dew point, and you don't want any condensation on the metal, because that will absolutely ruin your finish. But anyway, I have the acid on it. It's going to go into the hot box. It's going to get hot. I'm going to put the steam on it, and we're going to develop our rust. And then you'll see as I put it back in our tank, and we're going to boil this pass, and we're going to continue on with the blackening process. I have our water boiling, and I'm going to boil out our last pass on our barrel. This is pass number 4, and it's pretty good and black. This will be the last one, so I will boil this, and I will wire brush it, and then it will be on to putting our sharps rifle back together. So we'll let this boil for 10 minutes and we'll be back. Alright, we have our last pass on our barrel. Now it's time to wire brush it down and finish this job up. So when I'm carting off the barrels, I always like to start and stop on a flat. I just kind of, make a visual reference of whether there's holes in it for scope mounting or whatnot, but that way you're not constantly going over the same thing over and over again. And this barrel is actually, I believe, 9-ish pounds, almost 10 pounds, so this is a pretty heavy barrel. But we are going to card it one way, then I'm going to go the other way. And again, I'm not going to go into huge specifics on how you rust glue, but you do want to use a wire wheel. I like the brushes that are carbon steel and they only have about a 2.5 thousandths diameter wire. That's what I'm using here. They're very soft. And I just kind of prefer the job you get out of them. All right, and that's it. Now we're gonna seal this off with oil. Hello everyone, Paul with RGS Restorations, and today we're back at the range finishing up where we left off with our Sharps project. Now, in all the rest of it, I went through what the barrels were, having the new barrel, the machining, a little bit of the bluing and all that, and now we have it all assembled on there, and this turned out to be a very heavy rifle. I think the barrel alone was like 9 pounds, so with everything on here, this has got to be approaching, I don't know, 18 pounds. I'll weigh it afterwards with a scope, 18 to 20, I'm guessing. Anyway, so we have our barrel on here. This is a 4570 again. And I discussed why I went that route and what the other barrels were and all of that stuff. So today we're just going to see what we get for accuracy at the range. Now, I'm not sure. It's a brand new barrel, not broken in. Obviously, it's never had a shot through it. So I just did a bore sight, which, to explain that, is on single shots like this, it's very easy. You can open your action, set the gun up so it doesn't move. It's absolutely perfectly still. And you look down the barrel and you get your bullseye in the center of your barrel, and then you line your scope crosshairs up on that bullseye. Actually, you want to be a little bit lower than it to account for bullet drop. So when your crosshair's lower and you raise up, you're accounting for that bullet drop and you should be on target. So kind of crude, but usually it's very effective, and the more you do it, the more accurate you can get at it. And sometimes it's unbelievable how close you can get. So we'll see where we're at here with this. Now today I just have what I'm going to start shooting with are just some 405 grain RCBS. Now these, I just used some powder coated bullets. I don't know why. I had cast a whole bunch of them up and powder coated them and just wanted to see how well they worked. I also have some traditionally lubed bullets, and I think like close to a 500 grain. So I'm just going to shoot it with a bunch of different stuff, but mostly I have just coated bullets today, and for no other reason than I cast a whole bunch of them and coated a whole bunch of them, and now I'm sitting on a lot of coated bullets and I need to shoot some up. So anyway, that's the reason for that. But we're at 43 grains of Varget with this load, and let's see what it will do at 100 yards, see where we're at on target. Hopefully it's close, or, you know, good enough so that we can see it and make any adjustments. Okay, that one. We got there. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, like 7 overs. 14, 21, 28. And we got to come up 1, 2, 3, 4. If anybody has any questions on what kind of scopes I'm using, leave them in the comments. I'll go over it and answer it. But they are U-Nerdles. This one happens to be a 20 power. Because I like magnification. Yeah, I think that's pretty good. Let's see what it'll do.
One more shot for a 5-shot group. Even though this is a pretty heavy rifle, it's still they're still coming out of there pretty smart. I threw that one. Let's put, it's probably because I readjusted everything from where it was. See if it puts it back into where the other group. Yep, put it back into the other group. So I had the one go down. It was just because I shoved the whole barrel and everything farther forward from where I had it, and that will make a difference. And maybe that's a whole nother video showing how you can move a barrel around just by the balance point of where you have it. So when you're shooting for groups, as a reminder, and I was guilty of it that time, have a reference point where you have your barrel from shot to shot. There we go. There's our Sharps rifle with the new barrel and our first time firing it at the range. So I'm pretty happy with it. If you guys like this kind of content, make sure you subscribe to our channel and like our video. It definitely helps. If you have any comments, leave them below. Let us know what your experience are with perhaps maybe coated bullets and Sharps rifles or not. Now, again, this is a brand new barrel on here, so will it get better with shooting it? It shouldn't get any worse anyway. So overall, I'm very happy with it, and I hope you guys enjoyed watching the process to put a new barrel on here and the first time at the range shooting it. So as always, until we see you at the range again, happy shooting.